it's James, and welcome to the Inversiverse episode 19. The Alchemy Within, Food, Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. We are told we are what we eat, but what if that truth runs far deeper than biology? What if food doesn't just build the body, but sculpts perception, emotion, memory, and even belief? In this episode of the Inversiverse, we explore the unseen influence of diet not as a lifestyle choice, but as a fundamental interface between self, society, and control. From the gut-brain axis to ancient fasting rituals, from microbiome research to modern sugar addiction, we pull apart the layers of nutritional illusion to uncover how what we consume consumes us. We'll examine the manufactured myth of modern veganism and the corporate capture of plant-based identity. We'll ask why sugar, despite its addictive and psychoactive properties, is not classed as a drug. And we'll explore herbalism, homeopathy, fruitarianism, and fasting as forgotten technologies of self-regulation and spiritual alignment. Drawing from my own experience with the ketogenic diet, the only nutritional shift that's ever given me sustained mental clarity, this episode is less a prescription and more an invitation to listen again, to the body's subtle signals docked to its cravings, not as weakness, but as language, to the possibility that the sovereign self cannot be reclaimed without first waking up the gut, the blood, and the cells. Because what we eat is never just food. It is programming. Is a ritual. It is memory. Perhaps it is the most overlooked tool of awakening in a world built to keep us asleep. Section 1. The ingested self, food, perception, and bodily intelligence. From the moment we're born, the body begins to communicate with us through hunger, taste, texture, and rhythm. Long before we speak, we eat. Long before we read, we reach. Yet somewhere along the way, this ancient dialogue between body and nourishment is severed, replaced by guidelines, marketing, moralism, and shame. This section begins by reframing food not as a thing, but as a message, a medium, a form of sensory language that speaks to every system in the body, and more importantly, to the mind. What we eat influences not only our weight and energy, but also our emotional state, cognitive clarity, and even the tone of our inner monologue. The gut-brain axis, a forgotten interface. Recent research confirms what traditional systems of medicine understood intuitively. The gut and the brain are in constant conversation. Through the vagus nerve, through hormones, through microbial metabolites, what happens in the digestive system directly influences mood, memory, focus, and even personality traits. In many ways, we are not who we think we are. We are who our gut flora are. Our cravings, impulses, resilience, and sense of self can all be co-authored by the invisible life forms that live within us. Antidepressants, for instance, often act on serotonin pathways, yet over 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain. This opens uncomfortable questions. Is our mental health crisis partially a nutritional one? Do inflammatory foods chemically reinforce our thought patterns? Are we treating symptoms with pills when the root may lie in what's on the plate? Personal story. Clarity on keto. As someone who has navigated psychological, philosophical, and existential terrain extensively, I found something unexpectedly profound in the ketogenic diet. The clarity, emotional stability, and absence of background noise, mental or physical, weren't subtle. It was transformational. For the first time, food seemed to be supporting consciousness, rather than clouding it. Keto, by dramatically reducing glucose dependence and stabilizing insulin response, alters the entire metabolic experience of being human. It's not just about weight loss or blood sugar. It's about how you feel yourself existing, sharper, quieter, more emotionally neutral, more spacious. It's akin to cleaning a fogged window you didn't even realize was fogged. The question then becomes, how much of our perceived normal is dietary distortion? Food as a tool of social programming. We are conditioned to think of food as a neutral domain, a consumer choice, a personal preference. But food is one of the most heavily regulated, commercialized, and manipulated elements of modern life. The processed food industry, in alliance with pharmaceutical interests, has a vested interest in maintaining a baseline of cognitive dullness, inflammation, fatigue, and dependency. Highly palatable foods, sugar, seed oils, and additives hijack our taste systems and, by extension, our emotional regulation systems. These aren't just snacks. They're emotional triggers, behavioral modifiers, and long-term mood shapers. We live in a world where our choices are engineered, our hunger is weaponized, and our intuition is drowned beneath synthetic craving. From consumer to communicator. To reclaim bodily intelligence means to shift from consumer to communicator, to listen again to the subtle signals of nourishment, satiety, inflammation, and fatigue. This isn't a return to diet culture, but a rejection of it altogether. True sovereignty begins not just in resisting media or political conditioning, but in reawakening our felt sense of what is right for us metabolically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because food is not just a substance. It is a frequency. The question is not just what are we eating, it's what is it doing to our ability to perceive. Self-reflection prompt. What is your current diet doing to your perception? Think back to moments in your life when you felt the most clear, balanced, emotionally stable, or creatively alive. What were you eating then? What weren't you eating? How do your daily food choices impact your mood, attention span, energy, and even your beliefs about yourself? Try not to judge or label, just observe the patterns. The body has likely been speaking to you for years. Practical activity. Track the mind-body loop. The Food Field Diary, a 5-day experiment. For the next 5 days, keep a simple handwritten or digital log with these 3 daily sections. What you ate, e.g. record meals, snacks, drinks, supplements. How you felt physically, e.g. energy, digestion, tension, inflammation, hunger. How you felt mentally, e.g. clarity, anxiety, calm, emotional volatility, motivation. At the end of the 5 days, look for correlations and contradictions. Did sugar impact your attention? Did skipping breakfast make you feel clearer? Did a certain food bring fog, irritation, or heaviness? This isn't about changing anything yet. It's about reconnecting with the body's subtle language and rewriting the story that food is separate from self-awareness. Research, references, and further exploration. Here's a collection of studies, books, and concepts that support and expand on the claims in this section. Gut-brain axis and the microbiome. Mayer, EA 2016, The Mind-Gut Connection. Explores how microbes influence mood, cognition, and stress response. Ian JF and Danan TG 2012. Mind-altering microorganisms. The impact of the gut microbiota on brain and behavior. Nature Reviews Neuroscience 13, 701, 712. Pseudo N 2014. Microbiome HPA axis and production of neuroactive substances. Advances in experimental medicine and biology. Keto and mental clarity. Agostino, DP, et al. Numerous studies on therapeutic ketosis and cognitive function. Westman, EC, et al. 2007. Low carbohydrate nutrition and metabolism. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Anecdotal and clinical evidence on ketogenic diets improve mental clarity, emotional regulation, and focus, especially in those with insulin sensitivity, ADHD, or mood disorders. Sugar, a psychoactive addictive substance. Avena, NM, Rada P, and Herbal, BG 2008. Evidence for sugar addiction, behavioral and neurochemical effects of intermittent excessive sugar intake. Neuroscience and biobehavioral reviews. Plastic, RH 2012. Fat chance, beating the odds against sugar, processed food, obesity, and disease. FDA documentation and public critique surrounding why sugar isn't classified as a drug, despite its dopamine reward cycle and withdrawal profile paralleling addictive substances. Research, references, and further exploration continued. General resources. Cullen, M2008 in Defense of Food. A mainstream but revealing critique of nutritionism and processed diets. J 2016, The Obesity Code, explores insulin metabolic flexibility and fasting. Perlmutter, D 2013, Grain Brain, focus on how refined carbs and sugars affect brain function and emotional regulation. Further areas for deep research: psychobiotics and their influence on mental health, vagus nerve stimulation through diet and breath, nutritional psychiatry, food-based interventions in mental health care, interoception, the body's internal sense system and its relationship to intuition and emotion, mitochondrial health and dietary fat as clean cognitive fuel, indigenous dietary systems and animistic views of food as spiritual essence. Conclusion to Section 1. The ingested self, food perception and bodily intelligence. What we've begun to uncover is that food is far more than fuel. It's a form of perception architecture. A silent script that programs not only the body's biology but the mind's clarity, emotion, and even identity. The deeper we listen to the body's signals, especially those dulled or distorted by years of standardized eating, the more we realize consciousness itself may be chemically influenced by what's on our plate. But if food is a language, who's writing the script? In the next section, we'll step out of the body and into the system to explore how cravings are not just biological but manufactured. We'll unravel how sugar, ultra-processed foods, and the modern plant-based illusion have been engineered to keep us addicted, distracted, and docile, all while the institutions meant to protect us turn a blind eye. Because sometimes the most dangerous drugs are the ones they convince us aren't. Section 2. Manufactured cravings, sugar, addiction, and the politics of appetite. We often assume cravings are a kind of personal weakness, a failing of willpower or discipline. But what if cravings themselves are manufactured outcomes? Not spontaneous urges from the body's natural intelligence, but pre-programmed behaviors engineered by design. In this section, we examine how modern food systems hijack our biology, rewire our emotional patterns, and reinforce dependence, not just on food, but on the systems that sell it. Sugar, the sweetest lie. Of all substances widely consumed today, sugar is arguably one of the most socially accepted and institutionally protected, and yet it's also one of the most physiologically and psychologically disruptive. From a personal standpoint, I've found sugar to be more addictive than most people realize. Its impact on my mental clarity, mood stability, and physical energy has been consistently negative, sharp highs, emotional volatility, and an almost narcotic pull that feels more like compulsion than choice. It is a reason I was diagnosed several years ago as a type 2 diabetic. Fortunately, I found the ketogenic diet and was able to reverse and lower my HbA1c blood levels. I still crave sugar and am highly sensitive to its effects on my body and mind. Sugar is irresistible to this day, but I have to maintain observation of how my body reacts to it, with lower levels of consumption. And yet, the FDA does not classify sugar as a drug, despite mounting evidence that it shares many of the same behavioral, neurological, and biochemical markers of addiction. Dopamine spikes, withdrawal symptoms, and increased tolerance are not metaphorical parallels. They're measurable effects. Why is this significant? Because if sugar is addictive and knowingly so, then its mass inclusion in everything from sauces to health bars to vegan snacks is not just a matter of flavor. It becomes a tool of behavioral control. Addiction by design, hijacking taste and emotion. Processed foods are engineered for bliss point optimization, a perfect balance of salt, sugar, and fat that triggers dopamine and overrides satiety cues. These aren't just indulgences. They're technological products, designed to create short-term reward while disconnecting us from long-term bodily feedback. We often think of addictions as moral or personal failures. But what happens when addiction is the intended outcome? What happens when hunger is hacked not to nourish, but to keep us coming back? The plant-based trap, processed veganism, and ethical confusion. You've probably noticed the rising tide of plant-based marketing. But from my own experience, much of what's marketed under the vegan or plant-based label today is far from natural. Many of these foods are ultra-processed, laden with preservatives, artificial flavorings, and unsurprisingly, sugar, At first glance, these options offer a moral high ground, cruelty-free, sustainable forward thinking. But under the surface, they often replicate the very same dynamics of corporate capture and biological manipulation found in mainstream processed food. I've seen how some who switch to these diets experience mood swings, fatigue, inflammation, and emotional volatility, and yet they persist out of a belief that this must be the cleaner way to live. This is how ideology replaces intuition, how narratives override nourishment. A real plant-based diet built from whole foods, thoughtfully combined, and rich in micronutrients is a completely different story. But that's not what the market sells. What it sells is the illusion of ethics wrapped in plastic and flavored with corn syrup. Craving as a weapon. Once you realize that cravings can be implanted, reinforced, and monetized, everything changes. Hunger becomes suspicious. Fullness feels unfamiliar. The line between nourishment and sedation blurs. Your mental fog, it may not be anxiety. It might be blood sugar fluctuations. Your emotional reactivity, it may not be trauma. It could be chronic inflammation. Your distraction, your fatigue, your low motivation. What if those aren't personality traits? What if the side effects of addiction we're told isn't addiction? This is why my own experience on a ketogenic diet was so revealing. Removing sugar, grains, and ultra-processed foods, even for a short period, made me realize just how altered my baseline perception had become. I wasn't foggy because of stress. I was foggy because I was being fed into a state of compliance. And I had no idea. From appetite to autonomy. To reclaim appetite is to reclaim agency. It's to realize that eating is not a neutral act, it's a ritual, a form of alignment, a feedback loop between body and consciousness. Once you've experienced a clear mind, a calm emotional baseline, and sustained energy without constant snacking or stimulation, you can never truly go back. You begin to question why we're all being told that 3 to 6 meals a day is healthy, that sugar is harmless, and that ultra-processed soy burgers are a badge of moral superiority. The truth is, if hunger can be manufactured, so can obedience. And maybe that's the real purpose of these cravings, to keep us too distracted to hear what the body is asking for. Self-reflection prompt. What cravings dominate your day, and where do they come from? Observe your relationship with food. Do you crave sweetness during stress? Do certain foods feel like emotional comfort or escapism? Can you distinguish between true hunger and programmed desire? Reflect on how often your eating is automatic, reactive, or emotional. Then ask, who taught me to eat this way, and what parts of me does it keep quiet? Practical activity. The craving tracker, unmasking food programming. Oh, build awareness around when, why, and how you reach for addictive or processed foods. For 7 days, track each moment you crave or consume. Sugar, including sweeteners, fruit juice, and hidden sugars. Caffeine. Assess vegan or healthy snacks, e.g. bars, crisps, meat alternatives. Emotional comfort food, e.g. heavy carbs or binge snacks. Each time note. 1 time of day. 2. Physical state, e.g. tired, hungry, full, tense, bored. 3. Emotional state, e.g. anxious, sad, lonely, restless. Or celebratory. 4. What the craving might be masking, e.g. need for rest, connection, or regulation. At the end of the week, pattern match. What are you feeding? Research, references, and further reading. Cravings, satiety, and food engineering. Moss, M 2013, Salt, Sugar, Fat. How the Food Giants Hooked Us. Investigates how food corporations design products to be addictive and neurologically rewarding. Hessler, DA 2009, The End of Overeating. Shows how hyperpalatable foods override satiety cues and condition repetitive eating. Processed Veganism and Industry Capture. Montero, CA, et al. 2019, Ultra-Processed Foods. What they are and how to identify them. Public Health Nutrition. Explores the health impact of ultra-processed plant-based products, now dominating vegan diets. Hollis, J.L., et al. 2022, Nutritional Profile of Commercial Vegan Meat Analogues compared to Real Meat Products. Most vegan meat products were found to be highly processed and nutritionally inferior. Further exploration topics: food as corporate ritual, Edward Bernays and early food marketing, the role of emotional regulation via glucose spikes, vagus nerve dysfunction and processed diet correlation, food deserts, class control and sugar subsidies, behavioral economics and manufactured dietary dependency. Section 3: Ketosis, Fruitism and Dietary Extremes, Finding Truth Through Contrast. In a world saturated with noise, sometimes clarity arrives not through consensus, but through extremes. When nutritional advice becomes more ideological than intuitive, it's often in the contrast between opposing paradigms that deeper truths emerge. This section explores two such paradigms, ketosis and fruitarianism, not as competing dogmas, but as mirrors that expose how food shapes the way we think, feel, and exist. Ketosis, the cognitive recalibration. There's something unmistakable that happens when the body shifts into a ketogenic state. For me, this transition wasn't just physiological, it was existential. The fog lifted, emotional volatility softened, thought loops slowed. I felt more stable, not in a numb or dissociated way, but in a way that felt deeply embodied. This wasn't imagined. Ketosis alters the body's metabolic substrate, switching from glucose to ketones as fuel. Ketones are cleaner burning, more efficient, and anti-inflammatory. The result isn't just sustained energy. It's a more coherent experience of being. For someone engaged in deep psychological and philosophical inquiry, this change felt revelatory. My cognitive bandwidth widened. My emotional triggers became less reactive. What I once attributed to my personality or my mood was in part dietary noise. Keto brought me back to a neutral baseline, a version of myself I hadn't known was possible. It made me question how much of what we identify as us is just a byproduct of what we're metabolizing. Fruitism, the lightness illusion. In stark contrast sits the fruitarian path, a diet consisting almost entirely of raw fruits, and in some interpretations, tender greens. At first glance, this appears to be the polar opposite of keto, glucose heavy, spiritually symbolic, high vibration, often associated with purification or ascension. Fruitarians often describe a sense of lightness, emotional openness, and spiritual connection. And while some of these effects may be real, especially after years of heavy, processed eating, it's crucial to differentiate detox clarity from long-term vitality. There's an alluring narrative here. The less dense the food, the more pure the consciousness. But purity can become pathology. Just as processed veganism hides behind moral virtue, fruitism can become a disembodied bypass trading grounded nourishment for transcendence at the cost of long-term stability. Where keto builds stability through constraint and regulation, fruitism seeks elevation through simplicity and surrender. Both have lessons, but neither should be worshipped without awareness of the body's individual needs. After all, the body is a real-time operating system. The functional requirements depend on the real-time needs of the moment, based on internal bodily signals and stimuli. Extremes as mirrors, not masters. I explored both ends of this spectrum, not to find the right diet, but to observe how dramatically different fuel sources altered my internal world. On keto, my thoughts were slower but deeper. I was less emotionally erratic. I could hold tension without collapsing. On high fruit, I felt momentarily euphoric, connected, even visionary, but increasingly ungrounded, unstable, and fatigued. These are not universal truths. They're personal data, but therein lies the lesson. There is no universal truth when it comes to diet. There is only the relationship between your body, your biochemistry, and the reality you're trying to build. And sometimes the only way to hear the body is to remove all the background interference. The false binary of balance. Mainstream advice often urges moderation, but moderation in a poisoned system still yields dysfunction. Sometimes it takes an extreme shift like ketosis to remember what it feels like not to be inflamed, distracted, or chemically imbalanced. Likewise, sometimes we reach for extreme lightness like fruitism when we're trying to purify not just the body, but the soul. It may be less about food and more about unprocessed emotional heaviness, pain we don't know how to digest. Both extremes become diagnostic tools. They show us what parts of ourselves are asking for attention. Whether it's the brain needing fuel stability or the heart seeking spiritual levity, diet becomes a mirror, not a religion. Closing thought. What if the path to food freedom isn't finding the right answer, but learning to feel the difference? When you taste mental clarity, when you feel your nervous system shift, when cravings stop controlling you, you begin to realize how profoundly you've been conditioned to eat in ways that keep you disconnected. Sometimes the most radical act is not the diet you choose, but your willingness to notice how it changes who you become. Self-reflection prompt. What version of yourself emerges when you change how you eat? Consider times you've shifted your diet, whether it was intentional, e.g. keto, veganism, fasting, or unintentional, e.g. illness, stress, or travel. Who were you mentally during that phase? What changed emotionally, spiritually? Were there qualities that disappeared or surfaced? Write about the identity shift that came with those changes and ask, was it the food itself, or what the food allowed me to feel, release, or stabilize? Practical activity, the polarity protocol, mapping your inner terrain, purpose. To explore how different dietary approaches alter your inner world without moralizing or clinging to ideology. Instructions. Choose 2 contrasting dietary approaches, e.g. keto versus high carb and or fruit-based. Track each for 4-7 days. Log your daily experiences in a table, like the one shown. After completion, compare the patterns. Which diet made you feel most emotionally stable? Which one felt mentally spacious or spiritually sharp? Which version of you felt most like you? References and further reading. Here's a collection of unique resources that dig deeper into the polarities of diet, cognition, energy, and identity, specifically related to ketosis, fruitarianism, and the impact of dietary extremes on the human experience. Ketosis and Cognitive Emotional Stability, Anchor MC et al. 2017. Ketogenic Diet for the Treatment of Mood Disorders and Neuropsychiatric Symptoms in Epilepsy. A review, Epilepsy and Behavior, explores how ketones influence mood stability, cognitive focus, and neurological calmness. Volek, J.S. and Finney, SD 2012, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. A biochemical and metabolic deep dive into how low-carb living shifts brain and body function, particularly for performance and clarity. Poison, D 2017, Therapeutic Potential of Adenosine in Epilepsy and Other Neurological Disorders. Neuropharmacology, research supporting keto's neurological benefits through anti-inflammatory pathways. Fruitism, light diets, and esoteric nutrition. Arnold Ehret, 1913, The Mucusless Diet Healing System. A foundational fruitarian text that connects diet with spiritual purity, though controversial in medical circles. Dr. Robert Morse, ND, The Detox Miracle Sourcebook. Advocates fruit-based detoxing as a path to cellular regeneration and spiritual clarity. Cousins, Gabriel, Spiritual Nutrition, 6 Foundations for Spiritual Life and the Awakening of Kundalini. Explores how raw vegan and fruit-based diets are used to raise consciousness and activate subtle energies. References and further reading continued. Food Identity and Polarity Thinking. Douglas, Mary, 1972, Deciphering a Meal. A brilliant anthropological analysis of how food choices reflect moral systems and cultural identities. Krista Scott Dixon, Why I Want to Eat. Fixing Your Food Fuckdupetude. A grounded, no-nonsense look at disordered eating and dietary identity through a psychological and behavioral lens. Aya G, Green Med Info, articles on dietary dogma, metabolic individuality, and food as coded information. Offers alternative perspectives outside of mainstream dietary science. Section 4, Microbial Minds, the Gut as Our Hidden Brain. For most of human history, intelligence was seen as a property of the head, something stored in the brain, accessed through thought, and measured by reason. But modern research, combined with ancient wisdom, is beginning to dismantle that idea. Not only does the body think, it remembers, feels, adapts, and knows. And nowhere is that intelligence more profound than in the gut. In this section, we explore the gut not as a passive digestive tube, but as a second brain, one that houses a nervous system, produces the majority of key neurotransmitters, and is home to a vast microbial ecosystem that influences our thoughts, emotions, and sense of self. The enteric nervous system, a brain below the brain. The gut contains over 100 million neurons, more than the spinal cord, and communicates constantly with the brain via the vagus nerve, a primary highway for emotion, memory, and mood regulation. This network is known as the enteric nervous system, and it operates semi-independently, controlling digestion, regulating immunity, and even impacting decision-making. When the gut is inflamed or imbalanced, this system doesn't just misfire physically, it affects how we perceive the world. A dysregulated gut may result in anxiety, depression, brain fog, irritability, or even derealization. And yet, most people treat these as isolated mental problems rather than symptoms of deeper microbial miscommunication. Microbiome, an invisible collective. Trillions of microorganisms live inside your gut, a teeming civilization of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that form what's known as the gut microbiome. These microbes are not just passive residents, they are co-authors of your reality. They modulate your immune system, synthesize neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, influence hunger signals and food preferences, help regulate inflammation and stress response. In many ways, you are a we. Your thoughts and feelings are shaped by chemical conversations between your human cells and non-human guests. Childhood diet, dysbiosis, and the shaping of the self. The gut microbiome begins developing at birth and is dramatically influenced by a mode of delivery, C-section versus vaginal birth, breastfeeding versus formula, early antibiotic exposure, childhood diet and trauma. For those of us who experienced early instability, disconnection, processed diets, or emotional neglect, it's possible that gut dysbiosis formed the foundation of our emotional regulation challenges. What we've been calling neurodivergence, hypersensitivity, or even mental illness might, in part, be a microbiological response to a hostile internal terrain. The inner child may not just be emotionally wounded, it may be biologically unbalanced. Gut healing as inner work. In the same way, shadow work invites us to bring consciousness to repressed patterns, and gut healing invites us to bring biological coherence to unconscious suffering. Addressing food intolerances, leaky gut, SIBO, or candida overgrowth isn't just physical, it's emotional repair work. When the gut stabilizes, the nervous system softens. Safety returns, mental noise recedes. This has been part of my journey, recognizing that some of what I thought were fixed traits, emotional dysregulation, irritability, fatigue, were state-dependent distortions created by microbial imbalance. Healing the gut wasn't just a dietary upgrade. It was a rewiring of how I experience reality itself. The feedback loop. You shape your microbes, and they shape you. Your microbiome adapts to what you feed it. Craving sugar may not be you. It may be candida or opportunistic bacteria demanding fuel. Likewise, introducing diversity through fermented foods, fiber, and nutrient density can begin to reshape who you become. There is a feedback loop between your internal ecosystem and your external identity. You are not broken, but your internal environment may be out of sync with the person you're trying to become. Closing thought. What if the voice in your head isn't just psychological, but microbial? What if your most persistent emotional states are ecosystem echoes of signals from an unseen community within? To know yourself more deeply may require not just journaling or therapy, but fermentation, fasting, and feeding the bacteria that make mental peace possible. Self-reflection prompt. What if your emotional baseline isn't you, but your gut chemistry speaking? Reflect on your typical inner climate. Do you often feel anxious, low, reactive, foggy, or unmotivated? Have you ever noticed a sudden shift in mood after a change in diet, medication, or illness? How do you emotionally feel after processed meals versus after clean, whole food ones? Take a moment to question, have I been pathologizing emotional patterns that are physiological ones? If your gut could speak without static or interference, what might it be trying to say? Practical activity. Build your inner biome blueprint. Purpose. Begin building awareness of the state of your gut ecosystem, not through supplements or fads, but through direct observation and pattern tracking. Create a simple one-page journal table with these daily sections for 10 days as pictured. Use the titles Day Food Focus, e.g. fermented fiber fasting, mood emotion, cognitive clarity, rate 0 to 10, digestive feedback, sleep quality, cravings addictions. Each day, focus on one of the following categories. Fiber-rich foods, e.g. greens, root veg, or resistant starch. Fermented foods, e.g. sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, or tempeh. Intermittent fasting, e.g. extend time between meals. Elimination focus, no sugar, dairy, gluten, or seed oils. Hydration and electrolytes, add minerals, structured water. After 10 days, review the table for correlations between digestive feedback, e.g. bloating, ease, discomfort, cognitive clarity and emotional balance, sugar or processed food cravings, insight. This creates a gut mood map, a personal decoding of how internal flora may be influencing your mental and emotional landscape. Research, studies and suggested reading. A brain axis and enteric nervous system. Gershon, MD, 1998, The Second Brain. The foundational book on the enteric nervous system and how it thinks independently of the central nervous system. Ayer, EA 2016, The Mind-Gut Connection. Integrates neuroscience, microbiome research, and clinical insight to explain how gut health shapes emotional and cognitive states. Carabotti M. et al. 2015, The Gut, Brain Axis, Interactions between Enteric Microbiota, Central and Enteric Nervous Systems. Annals of Gastroenterology, peer-reviewed breakdown of the mechanisms involved in gut-brain signaling. Microbiome and Mental Health. Ryan, J.F., and Danan, T.G., 2012, Mind-Altering Microorganisms. The Impact of the Gut Microbiota on Brain and Behavior. Nature Reviews Neuroscience. Landmark study outlining how gut flora influences stress, mood, and neurodevelopment. Anand T.G. and Cryan J.F. 2017. Gut Instincts, Microbiota as a Key Regulator of Brain Development, Aging and Neurodegeneration. Journal of Physiology. Ampson, T.R. and Masmanian. S.K. 2015. Control of Brain Development, Function, and Behavior by the Microbiome. L-Host and Microbe. Research, studies and suggested reading continued. Practical and accessible reading. Amit D. 2015. Brainmaker. The Power of Gut Microbes to Heal and Protect Your Brain for Life. A readable dive into how gut bacteria impact everything from Alzheimer's to anxiety. Presser, Chris, The Paleo Cure, Practical Guidance on Healing the Gut through Ancestral Principles, Anti-Inflammatory Diets, and Testing for Gut Dysfunction. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, Gut and Psychology Syndrome Gaps, the therapeutic approach for healing gut-related behavioral and neurological conditions in both children and adults. Section 5, Herbalism, Homeopathy and the Energetics of Healing. Modern medicine sees the body as a machine, with parts, systems and symptoms to be managed through chemicals and interventions. But traditional healing systems saw the body as something else entirely, a living field of energy, rhythm and resonance, where imbalance isn't just physical, but emotional, spiritual and environmental. Healing wasn't about suppression, it was about restoration and remembrance. In this section, we explore herbalism and homeopathy as frameworks of intelligence, not just in the plants themselves, but in how they communicate with the body, reflect symbolic meaning, and challenge the reductionist view of health. Herbalism, plants as resonant intelligence. Herbs are more than chemical compounds. They are living languages. In traditions like Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, and Western folk herbalism, herbs are classified not just by function, antibacterial, calming, etc., but by energetics, warming or cooling, moistening or drying, grounding or uplifting. This subtle awareness was intuitive and relational. A person wasn't treated in isolation, they were read like a terrain, constitution, mood, environment, lifestyle, and story. The herb was a messenger, a teacher, a reminder. Healing came not just from the plant's effect, but from the relationship formed with it. The deeper I've explored nutrition, the more I've felt drawn to this level of intimacy with nature. In a world of synthetic pills and sterilized clinics, herbalism reintroduces reverence, reminding us that the earth isn't just a resource, it's a collaborator. Energetic medicine, more than molecules. In both TCM and Ayurveda, illness is not random. It is the result of energetic imbalance, cold invading warmth, dryness disrupting flow, and stagnation replacing vitality. Herbs aren't deployed like bullets. They are balancing forces within a living system. Feeling anxious and ungrounded? Choose bitter roots and warming tonics. Feeling heavy, foggy, and damp? Use drying herbs and circulatory stimulants. Overstimulated and inflamed? Apply cooling, nervine allies. These systems didn't wait for a diagnosis. They observed what was already happening and asked the body what it needed to remember harmony. Homeopathy, the symbolic language of healing. Homeopathy is widely dismissed in modern medicine, often because its mechanisms evade conventional understanding. It operates on dilution, resonance, and the symbolic imprint of a substance rather than its molecular weight. But when viewed through the lens of consciousness, homeopathy mirrors the placebo effect as a tool of alignment. The principle of like cures like suggests that a substance which causes symptoms in a healthy person can, in infinitesimal form, nudge the body back toward balance in someone suffering those same symptoms. Critics see this as pseudoscience. But what if it's more like dream logic, where symbols, not substances, carry the message? In the Inversiverse ethos, homeopathy is not literal medicine. It's psycho-spiritual, signaling a gentle reminder to the body of how it once moved in coherence. Its power may not lie in chemistry, but in the re-establishing of internal trust. Plant consciousness, intuition, and folk healing. Long before science caught up, shamans, grandmothers, monks, and medicine men worked with plants through observation, communion, and dreams. Many herbs we now classify pharmacologically were once understood through personality, spirit, and story. Mugwort for dream work and the feminine unconscious. Ashwagandha for resilience and protection. Yarrow for boundaries and energetic shielding. Lemon balm for grief and heart coherence. These weren't just treatments. They were relationships, living metaphors that addressed the soul behind the symptom. And in many cases, they worked. We've inherited a system that demands scientific proof, yet ignores the lived truth of 1,000 years of wisdom. But what if healing has always been a matter of resonance, not reduction? From suppression to synchronization, conventional medicine often suppresses symptoms, fever, inflammation, and pain. But many of these symptoms are expressions of the body's intelligence, trying to recalibrate itself. Herbalism and homeopathy ask, what if the symptom is the solution trying to emerge? Rather than fighting the body, these systems invite it to remember. They support, nudge, and harmonize. They listen instead of overriding. This is more than healing. It's sovereignty, because the moment you stop outsourcing your body's wisdom, you begin to reclaim something far deeper, trust in your ability to align with life itself. Self-reflection prompt. What does your body need to remember, not suppress? Think about a recurring symptom, anxiety, fatigue, skin flare-ups, gut discomfort, or migraines. What emotional patterns accompany it? What have you done to silence or manage it? If the symptom were a messenger, not a malfunction, what would it be trying to say? Now imagine if healing meant listening rather than eliminating. What would that change in how you relate to your body? Practical activity, build your plant profile, purpose. Reconnect with the energetic intelligence of herbs through an intuitive relationship, not just as supplements, but as living allies. Step 1. Choose 3 herbs that attract you. Avoid Googling first. Use your instincts. Look through a visual herbarium, wander a local apothecary, or scroll through plant images. Choose 3 that evoke curiosity or resonance. 2. Create a plant profile table. Use the titles. Herb name, first impression, e.g. intuitive, energetic quality, e.g. warm cool, dry moist, light heavy, how it makes you feel, e.g. emotionally or physically, symbolic meaning or use. 3. Begin one form of plant relationship. Choose just one of the herbs and begin working with it for 7 days. As a tea, as an incense, or oil in a bath as a visual or meditative anchor. Each day, journal. How does it affect your energy, emotions, and dreams? What memories or sensations arise? Any changes in physical symptoms or focus? After 7 days, reflect on what you've learned about your body through the plant, rather than from it. Research, references, and suggested reading. Herbalism and Energetics. David Hoffman, Medical Herbalism. The science and practice of herbal medicine combines biochemical and energetic perspectives in a clinical herbalism framework. Matthew Wood, The Practice of Traditional Western Herbalism, a return to folk healing, energetics, and the personality of plants as intuitive medicine. Rosalie de la Forêt, Alchemy of Herbs, a gentle, accessible introduction to herbs through taste, energetics, and personal connection. Homeopathy and Symbolic Medicine. Samuel Hahnemann, 1810, The Organon of the Medical Art, the founding text of homeopathy. Details like cures-like and energy-based medicine principles. Anna Ullman, Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines, a balanced, user-friendly overview of how homeopathy operates outside conventional pharmacology. Dr. Julie Gerety, Clinical Trials in Homeopathy, Real Outcomes Beyond Placebo. Office review of surprising data showing efficacy in chronic illness, especially stress-related cases. Plant Consciousness and Spiritual Ecology. Stephen Harrod Buhner, The Secret Teachings of Plants. The Intelligence of the Heart in the Direct Perception of Nature explores the intuitive and non-verbal language between humans and plants. Monica Gagliano, Thus Spoke the Plant, A Scientist's Journey into Studying Plant Communication, Dreams, and Learning. Albin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, braids indigenous plant wisdom, ecology, and animist reciprocity through poetic narrative. Section 6, Ancient Hunger, Fasting, Discipline, and Spiritual Technologies. In a world built on constant consumption of food, media, noise, and validation, fasting becomes radical. Not just as a health trend, but as a technology of disobedience. A way to temporarily suspend the cycle of desire, addiction, and distraction in favor of clarity, renewal, and inner signal amplification. Fasting is ancient. Every major spiritual tradition has used it not for weight loss, but for vision, purification, and connection. The body, when empty, does not weaken. It sharpens, it listens, it reveals. In this section, we explore fasting not just as a nutritional tool, but as a sacred act of sovereignty, one that brings the body, mind, and spirit into sharper alignment with truth. The physiology of hunger, beyond willpower. From a biological standpoint, fasting initiates a powerful cascade. Blood sugar stabilizes. Insulin drops. The body begins cellular recycling, known as autophagy. Inflammation decreases. Cognitive clarity often increases due to enhanced production of ketones and brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF. This is not starvation. It's strategic restoration, a process the body is wired for, but rarely enters in the modern world of 24/7 food access. And for many, including myself, extended periods without food have revealed not weakness, but agency, a state of surprising calm, even a kind of stillness that feels spiritual. It reminded me, hunger is not always something to be feared or suppressed. Sometimes it's sacred. The ritual of refusal, fasting as rebellion. To fast is to say no to one of the most socially reinforced impulses we have, to consume. And that refusal is potent in religious traditions. Fasting was often used to prepare the body for revelation. In occult practices, it was a way to cleanse the lower energies and attune to higher frequencies. In ancient cultures, it marked transitions, grief, sacrifice, or awakening. Today, fasting often gets reduced to biohacking, but that misses the point. The true power of fasting lies not in apps or macros, but in the internal confrontation it initiates. Who are you when your cravings are silent? What arises when there's nothing to soothe with? What thoughts return when the body isn't busy digesting? Fasting strips away comfort and distraction, and in doing so, it amplifies whatever has been ignored. Spiritual fasting, crossing the threshold. Beyond biology, fasting opens altered states of consciousness. Whether dry, water only, intermittent, or juice-based, it has long been used to. Enter visionary or dreamlike states. Prepare for ceremony, prayer, or inner work. Detach from material fixation. Deepen intuition and receptivity. In some esoteric schools, hunger is seen as a portal, a way to thin the veil between the seen and unseen. The body becomes light, the senses sharpen, and time itself seems to warp. It's no coincidence that figures from Jesus to the Buddha to Sufi mystics all used fasting to access the divine. Fasting is a forgetting of the material, the programmed, the animal, and a remembering of something subtler within. The shadow side, when hunger becomes harm. Of course, like all powerful practices, fasting can be co-opted by ego or trauma. For some, it becomes a way to control, punish, or dissociate from the body. And that's why intention is everything. Fasting must come from reverence, not rejection, from a desire to listen, not to dominate. In my exploration, the most meaningful fasts weren't the longest or most disciplined. They were the ones in which I felt more connected to my body, not less. Fasting isn't about negation, it's about space, silence. Resetting the dial so the next signal is clearer. Closing thought. Fasting is not a performance, that is a pause. A moment to reset not just the body, but the loop of consumption that defines modern life. When we fast, we reclaim the sacredness of choice. We step outside the system that tells us to always want more, and remember that emptiness too is a kind of nourishment. Sometimes hunger isn't a lack, it's alignment. Self-reflection prompt. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel truly empty and listen? Sit with the idea of hunger. What does it mean to need something? How do you respond when your body asks for food? When do you eat to nourish, and when do you eat to escape? Reflect on a time when you weren't constantly full, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. What did you notice more clearly in that emptiness? And what do you avoid by never allowing space to open? Practical activity. The 24-hour awareness fast. Purpose. To reconnect with the body's natural rhythms, bring awareness to habitual consumption, and experience as a meditative practice, not just a dietary one. Apparition. Evening before. Choose a 24-hour period, e.g. 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eat a nourishing, balanced meal the night before. Set the intention. I am not depriving myself, I am creating space to listen. During the fast, drink plenty of water or herbal tea. A journal once in the morning and once in the evening using these prompts. What sensations are arising? What thoughts or emotions come up with the absence of food? What is becoming louder in the silence? If intense cravings arise, ask, is this physical or emotional? What do I want instead of food right now? Break the fast with intention. Eat slowly. Express gratitude for the nourishment. Reflect, what did I learn about myself, and what did I let go of? References, studies and suggested reading. Scientific and physiological fasting. Longo, Volta the Longevity Diet, offers clear scientific insights on how fasting promotes cellular repair, brain health and metabolic balance. Atson, Mark P. 2017 Intermittent Fasting and Cellular Autophagy. And New England Journal of Medicine explores how fasting triggers cellular cleanup, reducing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases. Spiritual and philosophical perspectives. Sufi teachings on fasting, various authors. Fasting is purification of ego and alignment with divine will, often often framed as a way to lighten the soul. Will Johnson, the posture of meditation. Though not about fasting per se, this book reframes embodiment and stillness as gateways to insight, valuable for understanding fasting's meditative function, psychological and shadow aspects. Caroline Knapp, Appetites. Why Women Were Raw, intelligent look at how hunger, control, and longing intertwine, especially in emotional and cultural contexts. Dr. Anita Johnston, Eating in the Light of the Moon, uses metaphor and story to explore emotional eating, hunger, and feminine intuition around nourishment. Section 7. Veganism and the Ethics Illusion. Processed salvation or malnourished truth. Few dietary choices carry as much moral weight or emotional charge as veganism. It's framed as the enlightened path, compassionate, sustainable, forward-thinking. But what happens when an ideology built on empathy becomes a vehicle for corporate exploitation, nutritional confusion, and silent self-erasure? This section explores how modern veganism, once rooted in whole foods and spiritual intention, has been hijacked by the very systems it sought to reject, and how for many, the pursuit of ethical purity becomes a detour away from biological truth and internal trust. The original intention, compassion and cleanliness. At its core, veganism was born from a desire to reduce suffering, to live without killing, to consume without exploitation. In this sense, it was a rebellion against industrial agriculture, environmental harm, and the disconnection from our food sources. Many spiritual traditions supported this ethos. From Eastern mysticism to Jainism, the belief in non-violence extended to animals, viewing them as conscious beings worthy of protection. The idea wasn't to restrict, it was to purify, to eat in a way that uplifted both the self and the planet. For some, this principle still holds true. But the system around it has changed, and so has the food. The process takeover, vegan in name, not in nature. Today, vegan often means ultra-processed, sugar-laden, seed oil-soaked synthetic products that resemble real food in shape alone. O-meats, plastic-wrapped soy sausages, frozen fake cheese with 35 ingredients and a shelf life longer than your cat's life. The problem isn't that they're meat-free. The problem is that they're life-free, stripped of nutrients, dead on arrival, and manufactured in the same labs as the junk food they pretend to oppose. From my own experience, I've watched people enter veganism with spiritual sincerity and leave malnourished, hormonally imbalanced, emotionally volatile, and psychologically lost. Not because plants can't sustain life, but because processed veganism isn't plants. It's profit. And it begs the question, when a movement rooted in compassion becomes a product line, who's really being fed? Nutritional consequences, the unspoken crisis, long-term veganism, especially when heavily reliant on processed foods, can lead to B12, iron, zinc, and omega-3 deficiencies, disrupted hormone production, especially with excess soy and low saturated fat, mood instability and anxiety due to low dietary cholesterol and impaired neurotransmitter synthesis, dysbiosis from high oxalate, phytic acid, and fiber overload, loss of muscle tone, fatigue, and hair thinning. Many of these effects can take months or years to show. And because veganism is often entwined with identity and morality, people ignore the symptoms, afraid to fail or betray the cause. This creates a powerful psychological trap. If your body disagrees with your ideology, you assume the body is wrong. Spiritual bypass, identity, and self-erosion. Veganism, for some, becomes more than a diet. It becomes a form of virtue signaling, a visible badge of righteousness. But this can also create shadow. The suppression of animal instincts such as anger, desire, power, sexuality, in favor of lightness. The rejection of ancestral lineage and embodied grounding. The avoidance of confrontation, responsibility, or discomfort under the guise of non-violence. A disembodied moralism that forgets complexity in favor of purity. In this way, modern veganism mirrors many modern ideologies, well-intentioned, emotionally charged, easily monetized, and vulnerable to manipulation. The real question, who is your diet serving? This isn't a condemnation of veganism. Whole food, plant-based diets can be healing, powerful, and conscious. The issue lies in the co-option when ethical eating is reduced to marketing slogans, and health is sacrificed for identity. So we must ask, is your diet making you more whole, or just more obedient? Is it aligning you with nature, or with factory-made substitutes? Is it rooted in self-trust or external approval? Because no matter what label you choose, vegan, paleo, fruitarian, carnivore, if it separates you from your body's feedback, it's not consciousness. It's control. Closing thought. Ethics without embodiment becomes ideology. Compassion without nourishment becomes martyrdom. To truly live in alignment means to feel what is true for you, not just morally, but biologically. That doesn't always look pretty. It doesn't always fit a movement. But it's real, and in a world selling clean choices that quietly deplete the soul, maybe the most ethical thing you can do is feed yourself what your body has been begging for. Self-reflection prompt. Is your current diet a form of alignment or performance? Ask yourself, why did I originally choose this way of eating? What part of me does it protect, express, or defend? Have I ever ignored bodily feedback in order to stay consistent with my ideals? Now go deeper. If I didn't have to explain my diet to anyone, what would I eat differently? What do I know deep down isn't working for me, but I justify anyway? Let your body answer honestly, not your beliefs. Practical activity. Diet without labels. A 7-day self-reconnection. Purpose. To temporarily let go of ideology and rebuild eating habits based on felt sense, not external identity or ethics. Guidelines. For 7 days, do not label your diet, e.g. vegan, keto, etc. Each time you eat, ask, am I drawn to this or obligated by it? How do I feel before, during, and after this meal? What is my energy, mood, and digestion telling me 1-2 hours later? Track your experience. Use headings or table as shown. Day. What I ate, no labels. Pre-meal intuition. Post-meal mood energy. Was this nourishing or performative? Reflection after 7 days. What patterns surprised you? Did you crave things you'd previously forbidden? Did your energy or mood shift with different choices? What happens when you remove the identity from the food? Insight. This isn't about abandoning ethics, it's about rebuilding ethics around embodiment, not abstraction. Selected references and further reading. Nutritional Risks and Realities of Vegan Diets. Craig, W.J. 2009 Health Effects of Vegan Diets. American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Identifies common deficiencies in long-term vegans, e.g. B12, omega-3 and iron, and the importance of proper planning. Davis, M. and Molina, v. 2014, Becoming Vegan, Express Edition. Pro-vegan, but honest about the supplementation and strategy needed for sustainable health. Ideology, Identity and Dietary Dogma. Aya Keith, The Vegetarian Myth, a powerful controversial book from a former vegan exploring soil health, biology, and the unintended consequences of industrial agriculture. Nina Tycholz, The Big Fat Surprise, investigates how food ideology shaped flawed science and led to mass adoption of high-carb, low-fat diets with damaging results. Ethics and Industry Co-option. Dr. Mark Hyman, Is plant-based processed food really healthy? Critiques. The modern plant-based industry from a functional medicine perspective. Action 8. Subtle energies and frequency foods. Not all nourishment is material. Some of what sustains us cannot be weighed, measured, or digested, yet it shifts the way we think, feel, and exist. In a world dominated by macros, supplements, and rigid biochemistry, this section invites a different lens. What if food is also frequency? What if eating is not just a biochemical transaction, but an energetic alignment, a resonance between what we take in and who we are becoming? This is the domain of subtle nourishment prana, chi, life force found not only in food, but in breath, sunlight, water, silence, and intention. Eating light, nourishment beyond nutrition. Ancient systems like Ayurveda and Taoism always recognized that food carried more than calories. It carried energy. A food could be grounding or stimulating, cooling or heating, expansive or contracting. Its effects weren't only seen in the body, but felt in the mind and spirit. Modern science often scoffs at this, but many who fasted, cleansed, or shifted to whole foods report a similar transformation. Sharper dreams, lighter thoughts, deeper emotional spaciousness. It's not just that the food was clean, it's that the frequency of what entered the body changed. When I experienced ketosis, I noticed a mental silence that felt almost spiritual, a clear signal beneath the noise. Others who've turned to raw food, fruitarianism, or sun-based practices have described feeling plugged in, not stimulated, but activated. What if these are all glimpses into a forgotten truth? Food changes not only the body, but the field around it. Water, sunlight, and the invisible menu. We are taught that food is solid, but some of our most vital inputs are non-solid. Sunlight influences hormonal cycles, serotonin, vitamin D production, and pineal gland activity. Structured water, as found in living springs, fruits, and inside cells, carries coherence, memory, and vibrational patterning. Grounding direct contact with the earth modulates inflammation and stabilizes electromagnetic chaos in the body. None of these are meals, but all are forms of nutritional input. When we start to see nourishment in this expanded way, food becomes a subset of a larger frequency ecosystem. It's not just what you eat, it's what your body absorbs, resonates with, and entrains to. As vibration, what are you tuning to? Every food has a frequency. Living, freshly harvested plants hold more bioelectric charge than something frozen, canned, or microwaved. Animal products from wild or ethically raised animals carry a different tone than factory-farmed meat. Even your emotional state while preparing food changes its effect. Experiments in water crystallization, plant responsiveness, and EMF studies all suggest that subtle signals affect biological coherence. So what happens when we regularly consume low-frequency food, angry slaughterhouse meat, sugar-laced fake vegan snacks, or ultra-processed lifeless matter? We don't just feel bad, we lose clarity. We become harder to tune, less sensitive, and more rigid. And the reverse is true. The more coherent the input, the more our inner signal sharpens. Breatharianism, pranic eating, and the edges of reality. Some mystics claim we can survive, even thrive, on very little food at all. Breatharians, sun gazers, and advanced yogis throughout history have described entering states where they live on light, breath, and inner stillness. These claims are extreme, often unprovable, and sometimes dangerous if misused. But metaphorically, they point to a truth that's deeply inversiverse. Not all hunger is physical. What if these practices are symbolic reminders that clarity doesn't come from constant consumption, but from stillness, simplicity, and alignment with something unseen? Maybe it's not about giving up food. Maybe it's about recognizing that food is only part of the system, and we've been ignoring the more subtle inputs all along. Closing thought. You are not just digesting nutrients. You are digesting frequency, memory, light, vibration. The question isn't just what should I eat? The question is what am I trying to tune myself to? And what's interfering with that signal? In a world of overstimulation and chaotic inputs, subtle nourishment becomes sacred. Sometimes what the body needs most isn't more calories, it's coherence. Section 9. Remembering the body, sovereignty, intuition, and cellular knowing. In the search for health, we're often told to look outward, experts, protocols, apps, and charts. But beneath all of that noise lies something older, quieter, and infinitely more intelligent than the body's knowledge. This section is about returning to that inner compass, about understanding sovereignty not as control, but as attunement, and realizing that the body, when unburdened by ideology, toxins, fear, and disconnection, already knows what to do. Intuition versus impulse, reclaiming the subtle signal. Modern culture often confuses intuition with craving. Listen to your body is weaponized to justify processed indulgence or emotional eating. But true bodily intuition is subtler. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Impulse seeks stimulation. Intuition seeks alignment. Impulse is urgent. Intuition is patient. To reconnect with this signal, we must first clear what's clouding it. Sugar, ideology, trauma loops, overstimulation, and the constant input cycle that prevents inner silence. Cellular sovereignty. Your body as an ancient intelligence. Your body has been refining its wisdom for millennia. Long before science, long before diet culture, long before moral panic, your body, through its cells, microbes, nerves, and fascia, was calibrating to environments, foods, threats, and rhythms. You don't have to program your body to be intelligent. You only need to stop interfering with it. True sovereignty is not about forcing discipline. It's about becoming receptive to what your body has been trying to tell you all along. This is the final illusion to dissolve, that healing comes from outside in. Closing thought for section 9. Sovereignty isn't a concept. It's a felt sense, an embodied clarity that rises when interference fades. We don't reclaim our health by fighting ourselves. We reclaim it by listening, synchronizing, and remembering that the deepest intelligence we'll ever encounter is already within the skin we're in. Your body has never lied to you, but the world around it has done everything possible to drown out its voice. Reflection and resources. Key takeaways. Food carries frequency, not just calories or nutrients. Subtle nourishment includes light, breath, emotion, intention, and environmental resonance. What you consume changes your field, not just your flesh. Intuition requires quiet conditions, and false hunger often masks emotional noise. Your cells are sovereign, but only if you stop outsourcing authority over them. Suggested pathways for exploration. Explore sunlight, grounding, hydration, and silence as non-food nourishment. Reintroduce slow eating, breathwork before meals, and gratitude rituals. Practice interoception, the art of sensing from the inside out. Use dietary experimentation to tune into clarity, not control. Research highlights. Aweri Robertson, 2018 Gut-Brain Axis and Frequency Exposure. Links between circadian rhythms, light exposure, and metabolic signaling. Fritz Albert Popp, 1998 Biophoton Emission in Cells. Explores how living cells emit light known as biophotons, suggesting communication beyond chemistry. Stephen Harrod-Buhner, Plant Intelligence, and the Imaginal Realm frames food and herbs as consciousness modulators that affect perception and inner clarity. Conclusion to episode 19, The Alchemy Within, Food Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. So we've come to the end of the presentation. We've been told what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, and above all, who to trust about what goes in our bodies. But as this episode has explored, food is not just nutrition. It is language.it is programming. It is frequency, from keto clarity to fruitarian fragility, from the microbial minds, shaping our moods to the ancient rituals of fasting and spiritual refinement, from herbal allies to processed vegan illusions. The story of what we consume is deeply entwined with who we become. This episode wasn't just about diet. It was about disconnection and the long path home. A path back to the intuition that predates nutrition labels, the clarity that isn't marketed but remembered, the sovereignty that starts not in the mind, but in the gut, the cell, the pulse. In a system that profits from disembodiment, to feed yourself consciously is rebellion. To fast when the world demands constant consumption is resistance. To slow down and feel what your body is saying, not what it's been told to say, is liberation. So whether you choose to eat plants, animals, light, silence, or intention, let it be from clarity, not conformity. Let it come from truth, not trauma. And let it guide you not toward perfection, but toward presence. Because the alchemy isn't just in the food. It's in the way we relate to it. You are not just what you eat, you are how you eat. Why you eat, and who you become when you stop eating the lie. I'm James, and thank you for walking through this terrain with me, especially the parts I'm still learning myself. Until next time on the Inversiverse, bye-bye.